This is kind of surprising why this hasn't really been brought up in UK news and media, because I really do sort of agree with this. That this is, or it does now seem to be, a turning point between the relations between Brussels and London, or at least case the EU and the UK. Now, if you wind back the clocks back to February of this year, Rishi Sunak signed the Windsor Agreement, which was essentially, well, what's the best way to describe it? It was more a sticking plaster, at least, to try and solve the potential problems in Northern Ireland. Now, ultimately, this really hasn't solved the key issue in Northern Ireland, which was the fact that the DUP have still not resumed power sharing in Stormont, and Northern Ireland is still in the situation where it does not have a government. Now, at this time, they are still in this deadlock situation. It's not good for Northern Ireland. It's not good, to be honest, for its citizens. The fact that you do not have a sitting government and it is one party that is torpedoing essentially Northern Ireland from having a functioning democratic system, because they don't want to play ball, because they're going to be the second minister, or the second speaker in this case, and they're vetoing it at all because they just didn't happen to like the result. But apart from that, this deal did actually restore some trust between the UK and the EU, especially in regards to data sharing, which was one of the big things that the EU has constantly asked for. Look, let's share data. You're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. So we might as well at least work together. The biggest problem, of course, is the fact that we have had, well, even in this case now, but this seems to be somewhat changing, a massive pro-Brexit government that hasn't been interested in talking with the EU at all. So we're going to get more into this discussion, because I think this is kind of important to really talk about this thawing almost of relations between, as we said, between the UK and the EU. But before we get more into that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. There is the one-off donation link, where you can use the YouTube thank you button. And of course, there is the Pony Club as well. So essentially what has happened? Well, we can't get, shall we say, too excited. All we've really signed is a memorandum of understanding. And as we've discussed before, even though you've got Kimmy Badnock going over to America, desperately signing all these memorandums of understanding with these individual states in America, which basically mean nothing, because we don't have a trade agreement with America. So till you actually have a trade agreement with America, and even if we did, those memorandums of understanding are pretty much worthless. However, this memorandum of understanding actually sets up a regular biannual meeting, with the first one scheduled to take place this autumn. And it is going to mean that UK regulators and EU regulators can meet to discuss regulatory problems in and surrounding the financial services area. Now, I want to also very much stress that I think it was Marcus Sovak, I think, tweeted out about this as well, that even though this is a good turning point, as he says, this does not obviously restore the UK's access of its financial markets to the EU. It does not restore that access. But what it does allow is, again, that continued sort of regulatory alignment, the idea that we can have very similar regulatory alignments to the EU, that we can get on, that we can negotiate, that we can talk about this, that we can work together. And as I've said before, if we have this relationship where we are working together, where we are accepting, where we are having the same rules, then, as I said before, this argument that we should be outside the EU's regulatory orbit, with them, quote, forcing rules on us. But as I've said now, it doesn't matter, because we've got to follow the EU's rules anyway. And when most of our exports go to the EU, then companies are going to have to follow those rules and regulations anyway. So it doesn't matter. But this is once again another reason why I've said if we do these types of deals, if we do these types of even memorandum of understanding, or we sign an alignment deal of, hey, in this industry sector, if you do something, excellent, we'll sign up to it as well, no problem. If it means that those products can have access to your single market, like I say, this is what Switzerland has, a ton of these different alignment deals and etc. stuff like that. So eventually what happens is you just get to a situation where you just go, why aren't we in the single market customs union? If we're following all these different rules and regulations anyway, and we are agreeing with all of them, to be honest, that was always the case anyway. We did always massively agree with the EU's rules and regulations when it came to regarding the single market. Why not just be fully members? And I've said that should really be our goal, to work towards rejoining the single market and the customs union, because that would be a big boost back to our economy. And this is, I said it before and I'll say it again. I think this is a good step. This is a good step in the right direction. And even more surprisingly, as you can see, it's Jeremy Hunt shaking, shaking. I think I can't remember the woman's name now, but you can see her shaking, her hand there. And of course, he's not bursting into flames, as many a Brexiteer might indeed do if they were to see that. And this is probably also the reason, partly, why this hasn't really been brought up, certainly on the UK side of things, that we have signed this, because it would probably massively upset the Brexiteers, and the UK government is trying to very much keep this on the down low, that it has signed this agreement. And bear in mind, this is a memorandum of understanding, but this is a memorandum of understanding to set up, as we've said, that UK regulators and EU regulators can meet together on a regular basis to discuss regulation. And this also now brings into question where Rishi Sunak was going to bring in these new Edinburgh reforms and unleash this Big Bang 2.0. Are now those Edinburgh reforms, shall we say, also mysteriously going to get kicked into the long grass and not be discussed again? Because after all, if we're going to be discussing regulatory alignment, the last thing you want to do, as I've described the Edinburgh reforms as well, is remove the seatbelts from your economy, especially when it comes to the banks and financial services sector. Like I say, we saw what happened in 2008, and most of those regulations that Rishi Sunak wants to get away from are the ones that were brought in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis to make sure that, well, things don't get that bad again. So we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. But the fact that you now have the UK government committing to work with the EU on financial service regulation is a good step in the right direction. That's very good. That's very positive. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I am quite happy about this, that it has been signed. And ultimately, I'm kind of shocked that the Brexiteer reaction to this has been somewhat very muted, if nothing at all. But hey, there you go. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and an updation link called Buy Me Coffee. We can buy me coffee. There's the YouTube thank you button down below as well. And of course, there is the Pony Club you can support the channel with as well. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.